Welcome to a Radical Listening Week. And today, this afternoon, we've got a really important conversation. We have the working class community sharing some insights on their challenges, their barriers and opportunities across the sector. And I want to quickly introduce Sampira, Sam Butters and Jez Collins, who will be leading the conversation. Thank you all for checking in.
Thank you and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the fourth Radical Listening discussion. As Eddie said, today's session is focusing on the working class creative workforce, and I'm really pleased to be facilitating this conversation. If you don't know, Radical Listening Week has been organised by More Than a Moment, a creative agency, consultancy and innovation lab with a mission to end civic and cultural inequality in the 21st century, and was born in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Radical Listening Week is supported by Culture Central. Please do listen back to the previous sessions and tune in for tomorrow's final session if you can. And please do share the sessions across your social media platforms. We want to make sure we reach the maximum amount of people to listen back to these really important discussions. I'm Jez Collins. I am a middle-aged, 54 years of age, white Irish working class person. I have short, balding, really, I think, hair. I am wearing glasses. I have a bit of an unruly white grey ginger beard, courtesy of my dad, and I am wearing a black top. I am the founder of the Birmingham Music Archive, a creative and cultural organisation that is attempting to capture, document, celebrate and share music history, heritage and culture of Birmingham. I'm going to ask our guests to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll come back to talk to them about their work in due course. So I'm going to hand over to Sampira and just introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sampira. I'm a 31-year-old mixed race woman, and I'm wearing a black hoodie, a black cap, black glasses, and a black headscarf. I'm a horror producer, curator and writer. I was born in Nottingham and I've been in Birmingham for about 4 years now. And I produce, write and curate exhibitions, theatre and film in the horror genre.
And Sam.
Hiya, I'm Sam Butters. I'm a 28-year-old white male from Birmingham, working class. I have a white t-shirt on and a curly brown with little blonde tips, which is getting more and more closer to Jez's hairstyle then as the years go on.
I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Thank you both. So, as I said, during this session, we'll explore some of the challenges and opportunities that working class individuals and communities face in working in the creative sector. And I think we use that broadly, you know, the idea of the creative and arts and cultural sector, and what that sector can or may already be doing to encourage access and participation for working class people. I'm conscious that it's just the three of us on the panel, and we can't possibly represent or speak for the entire creative working class workforce, only our own lived experience. So please do join in, ask questions or comments, and we'll pick up on those during the conversation, and we'll try to answer them or include them in the discussion. Before we dive in more deeply, I just wanted to give a little bit of context to the session and to the idea of the working class creative workforce, and I want to read this out. Recent academic research has highlighted that the proportion of working class actors, musicians and writers has shrunk by half since the 1970s. And do check out the work of academics such as Dave O'Brien, Orion Brooke and others who are working on this issue. It's really interesting and quite informative. The Office for National Statistics data reveals that 16.4% of creative workers born between 1953 and 1962 had a working class background, but this has fallen to just 7.9% for those born 4 decades later, and that this reflects a similar decline in the number of people with working class origins. People whose parents had a working class job accounted for about 37% of the workforce in 1981, but by 2011, this has fallen to about 21%, predominantly due to the loss of manual industries such as coal mining in around Nottingham, for example, or perhaps more closely to home, the car industry here in Birmingham. People who grow up in professional families are 4 times more likely than those with working class parents to be in creative work. And that's quite startling figures there. And so with fewer working class people, it means fewer working class creatives in the sector to describe the experience of growing up in working class households and communities. And our voices and stories are being squeezed out. And yet we know these stories in literature, film, music, theatre, and across the sector are still being written, made and produced by working class creatives such as the two, Sampira and Sam, who are on screen with us today. So I wanted to leave that hanging there, a little bit of context for it, and perhaps dive straight in and perhaps come to you first, Sampira, and ask, how do you define class and, your own class identity? Is it something that's important to you?
Yes, it is important to me, but I sort of wish it wasn't. Like, I think when I was a kid, I probably wasn't working class because nobody was working. Like, my dad was on benefits and we were on benefits all the way to childhood. So it was only really when I entered the workforce that I registered that actually I wasn't working class when I was a kid because nobody was working. And I think throughout my whole working thing, even before I was in the arts, but now particularly in the arts, it becomes a really important thing because it impacts your trajectory, it impacts how much work you can take on, it sort of impacts everything. And I think I don't have a choice in that because I'm the breadwinner of my family. So I think it impacts me every day and the decisions that I make as a creative, for sure.
So when you say you're the breadwinner for your family, are you talking about your own nuclear family or an extended family?
Yeah, I think like my dad doesn't work, he's now disabled. My stepmom doesn't work, she's now disabled. So there's always been a thing that I feel obligated to do, that I support my parents and I'm always sending them money every month. That has become massively significant now with the cost of living crisis. Like, I paid all of my parents' gas bills last winter, or they would have frozen. And that's not like that's not like a theatre piece or like a dramatic point or, oh my god, that would be really good at the end of this play. Like, that's just real life.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that I'll come to you in a second, Sam, with the same question, but just picking up on that then, Sampira. So, if it's impacting and the cost of there, what makes you stay and work within the creative sector? I know you work in film in particular. So what keeps you there?
Because it's the thing that it's the thing that helps me make sense of the world. So the things that we see on the news, or the things that we see on TV, and how the world and the system and the class system is essentially crumbling in the late stages of, can we really carry on like this? You have to make sense of that in some way, or you just wouldn't get through the day. And I feel like that's what the creative industry does for me, because of the way that I navigate it. But also, if I leave, it's another person that's left. And it's a really cynical part of me that thinks that we are being, like, if we're being priced out of everything else, like housing, nice areas to live, gentrification, then it has to happen in the industry. So I feel like right now, with the cost of living crisis, with coming out of the pandemic, seeing how people were focused on, certain groups focused on, and certain institutions were focused on, and other people were sort of just left to deal with you know, whatever they had to deal with in the pandemic in the creative industries, I also feel like we're being priced out of the industry in a way. So if I go, then it's just another, it's another win, I suppose, because then there's not another person around saying like, this is what it's like for working class people and this is working class work.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sorry, Sam, I'm just going to pick up another little question with Sampira, just to look at that in a little bit more. So would you say for you, the work is really important for you as an individual, but also in terms of maybe the work that you produce, you are shining a light or highlighting some of these inequalities? Does your work reflect that?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's both. And I think I've always been a horror fan anyway, but I think the horror genre, since it was born, really, has always been chocker full of social commentary, and chocker full of how leadership structures work and how the system works. And you know, it's an extreme genre, but it's pinpointing societal fears, and it's pinpointing what happens if this carries on the way that it is, or somebody, you know, if this carries on the way that it is and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, what then happens to everybody else? And has always sort of catered to the outsiders of society. So I think, yeah, for sure, for on an individual thing, yeah, it's the way that I make sense of the world, and it's the way that I sort of hold on to a bit of hope, because if you can create and imagine, then you can still hope as a human being. But yeah, the genre, yeah, that particular genre definitely is full of all those stories and gives you an interesting way to be quite political or say something about society and not be preachy about it, because there's this other narrative going on.
Yeah, well, we'll come back perhaps on in terms of how you got into horror and that creative work in a little while, because I think it's fascinating the things that you just said there, and be interested to know more about that journey through it. Sam, I mean, apologies, but same sort of question to you. I mean, how you know, do you find class and you know, and your own class identity, and again, is it important to you?
I think very similar. I wish it wasn't, because you know, we it shouldn't be these conversations, and it shouldn't have to get to that point where it has to be fighting for the right to stay in the industry. That's not okay. It is important to me, because the work that I want to create and the legacy of my theatre company, I don't think I forgot to mention it, but that's what I do. I'm a founder of MTAM Theatre. It's for celebrating, showcasing and supporting working class artists, and that's the main ethos and driving force of it, because I've seen, as you were saying, Sam, like so many peers dropping out, and I mean, it shouldn't get to that point, but it is, because of everything, the cost of living crisis, everything that's going on. It's forcing people out. So my job, what I want to do, is do as much as I possibly can to support people in whatever way possible. And as it grows, hopefully that means we can support people financially and help them get work going, or just as a place where people can come and speak to industry professionals, and they're not being charged extortionate amounts or drama school fees, just so that they can get some sort of access and some sort of bridge into the industry. It can be come to us, and we can do what we can. So it is absolutely important for my work. Sort of jumping off the question that you asked earlier as well about, is it an individual thing or is it a group thing? And I think actually my mind has shifted from both of them. I'm an actor. I was about to say I was an actor. I'm still an actor. Plays universe. Don't take that away from me. I'm still an actor. But last year I had a wonderful year of acting opportunities. I was here, there, and everywhere doing it. And I still had the theatre company at the time, and I sort of came to the conclusion that a lot of this acting work I'm doing, great jobs, I normally just go for the stories that I want to tell. But a lot of them I was just taking because I was like, I need the job, I need the money, I need to be in work, because I don't want to be working 60 hours a week in order to just just live. And this year has been a massive shift in going, I need to go full force into the company, because this isn't an individual conversation. This is a group thing. There are people leaving left, right, and centre, and we just can't have it in order to keep authentic working class voices within the arts.
I'll come back on the work that you just mentioned there, Sam, because I think it's really interesting. You know, you've said about you've set up now this space and place for working class voices. So we'll come back on that in a second. But I just wanted to ask you both, as you're working with other creators, is class still an issue then? If I think about my own kids who are 19 and 6, we talk about it a lot in our family, but I'm not sure they have a sense that what it actually means. So I'm wondering, you know, in terms of yourselves, you know, is it still something that people talk about and identify with, or is it not? And it's, Sampira, I can see you nodding, so I'll go to you first then.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't talk for the generation after me. I mean, but they're dealing with the effects of they're now dealing with the next generation of the effects of however they try and restructure the class system, which I think is probably coming, maybe like an eradication of the middle class. I don't know. But yeah, for sure. I think you are assumptions are made about you before you go into a room, and if you're lucky enough to get into the room, like assumptions are made about your cultural references, what kind of art you're going to like, or whether you're going to understand art, whatever understanding art means. I don't know what that means, but there's all these assumptions about your capabilities and where you sit within art, and whether the art that you like has value, for sure. Like I think the majority of my career in the arts, and I'm still quite young in my career, but the majority of my career has been having conversations to solidify that my art has value, and that it can be seen as an art form. Like horror can be seen as an art form, video games can be seen as an art form, comic books and pro wrestling can be seen as art forms, and all of those things that I'm interested in and the things that made me want to be a storyteller are as valuable as, you know, something at the National, or, you know, a piece of art that gets into the Tate Modern or whatever that thing is. So on every level, you work and you work and you work, you save your money, or you take massive financial gambles. We probably take the biggest financial gambles in the industry. And institutions will probably disagree, because they will go, well, no, we've got so much risk. And it's like, yeah, but that's your budget. This is my life money. Like I'm putting my life money into my projects, which means that, you know, I can't go and socialize or do those things that, you know, make your life a bit nice, or, you know, I have to cut down on food, or I'm not going to heat my flat for the next 3 weeks because I really want to do this project. So you work and you work and you work, and you take all these gambles and all these sacrifices to walk into a room, and then for people to go, yeah, but, you know, you were born on a council estate and you've been on that council estate for however long, and now you've come into what do you know about art?
So, on that, I mean, again, and for you, Sam, here, just, again, picking up on that, there's a phrase around poverty porn. You know, the idea that you know, we want to, that actually our stories, our histories are taken and then made into films or books, but not through the lived experience of those people who've experienced it. And do you get a sense of that, either of you, that there's almost like a cool cultural cachet that we want to tell these stories, but actually we don't want to do anything for the individuals or the creators within the sector to change that or to encourage them to come through? Does that ring true with either of you?
100%, man. I mean, it's not even just the work that gets produced. It can also just importantly be a brand. There's a lot of people that can identify. You know, I only have to walk into Urban Outfitters and come out, and I can look like what people think are working class. Use it as a brand, because there was a shift in actually we need people from, you know, working class backgrounds. That's we need to see that. And then you've got people using that as well, which opens up a completely different conversation, because there's a tough way of as we're talking about identifying what class is, because, you know, let's take one. There's a person who has just come out of drama school. They've got very wealthy parents, grandparents, whatever, but they don't see that money. So where do they fit? Where does that fit for them? I don't know. I don't have an answer. Do they class themselves as working class, but they do have fallback money? You know, this is the terrain that we're working in now. So, you know, it's as Sam said, like, there's so many assumptions, and, you know, it's difficult to navigate that world where you've got actual people trying to make money. Like this, the financial risk thing, it's major. It's major. I've still got credit card debt from putting on work because I didn't get funding, which is, you know, it's tough to get, and, you know, you can't. I'm not going to base that on I'm working class. I didn't get funding. It was probably a terrible application, but I was like, I need to get this work on, because these voices are the authentic voices. I'm not going to hear another play about people going down the mines. You know, from someone who's never had that lived experience. It had to go on, and I had to get it done, and I'm putting my money on that and trying to work it off, because it has to be seen. It has to be heard.
Sorry, Sam, are you going to jump in then?
Yeah, I mean, the other it's nice timing that you bring that up, is that all the things that we go through that affect our everyday lives, and then you may get, like, you know, a big opportunity. You know, a big opportunity might come along, and, you know, a building wants to, you know, do whatever. So you get in the room, and then they go, we want you to make a play which essentially amounts to how terrible it is to be working class, and how sad it is, and the main character is so miserable, and their only goal is to move out of the council estate because it's so horrible and it's so terrible, and everyone around them is so terrible. So you've worked like years in your career, but then you walk in and you go, no, actually, like, I'm like a sci-fi nerd. Like, I want to make a sci-fi about some working class kids that, I don't know, find a UFO or whatever that thing is. And they go, oh, no, that's not really, you can't really tell that story.
So you feel...
So it's like, we're also confined into, like, when you said, you know, does class matter? It shouldn't. But, and, you know, the industry may be, oh, why are we always talking about class? And, you know, why are working class artists always so thingy about being working class artists? Because you put us in a box. And if the only time you're picking up the phone to us, or the only time you're calling us or thingying us an email, when, you know, some of us might write sci-fi, some of us might write horror, some of us might write opera. You don't know, because you don't ask. You pick up the phone and you send an email and you go, I want you to make this play about these characters, and all they want to do is get out of the council estate. So there has to be, like, some sort of acknowledgement that actually it goes both ways. The industry can keep you in that working class bubble if they want to, and go, no, you're a working class artist, you will always navigate this as a working class artist. But then you can't complain when working class artists either sort of go, well, all right, I'm going to make my own work and then see whatever, or they're going to talk about being working class. Yeah, it's a difficult conversation to have, but you put us in that bubble, and you've taken, you know, you've taken most of the money, you've taken most of the budgets to invest in people that went to the same schools as you, went to all the private schools, because we know that leadership positions in the arts, about 85 to 90% of them privately educated. In the population of Britain, 7% of people went to private school. So that's what we're dealing with in the arts, in the snow globe of the arts.
I wanted to talk about that point, and you've led us nicely into it there, Sampira. But in terms of sort of the representation of those, whether they're commissioners, whether they're producers, whether they're funding or policy organisations, as we mentioned earlier, if less working class people are coming into as creatives into that sector, there's how do they develop and then perhaps become the commissioners, the producers, rather than remaining the same sort of 7% of upper middle class or those elite networks. Do you still see this as an issue? I'm guessing you have, because how you've just sort of articulated. But Sam, coming to you, do you see that within your work and within how perhaps theatre or even in the acting work, that it's you are sort of stereotyped in terms of the roles that you can play or the plays that you may be able to write?
I was going to say acting less so, but however, I've been able to define my superpower as my Birmingham accent. It only gets me work in Birmingham, but I don't get a sniff at London. Because let me give you. This is a ridiculous example. Yeah, I was auditioning for a panto. First of all, don't do panto. I ain't no singer, ain't no mover, but I'm in the room, and then I was a prince. I know, hard to believe. And I did it in my accent. And they were like, actually, can we chat? Can we get rid of that? Can we have a posh accent? And I'm like, see, this is what this is. It was a reaffirmation for me of, I can't be doing that, man. I can't be changing that. So I guess I do see it in my acting, but that's also a personal choice. There's stories I want to tell as an actor. There's voices I want to be a part of. In terms of work produced, absolutely. I think there's different assumptions about me. First of all, people will. I don't. This is again a complete overgeneralization. People hear the accent and they assume something. Less so now, but they would. But there's, I've got people will make different assumptions about me. I'm a white male. They've got some assumptions around my class, but they ain't the people who are these heads that I can, So there is that. As Sam was saying, I want to tell the stories no matter what it is. It doesn't have to be about class. I'm writing a football play where someone gets punched in the face and they meet Diego Maradona. In this dream world, it's bizarre, crazy. You can talk about, but I don't want it to just be, exactly that. I don't want it to be. You've got to talk about how much struggle. You've got to talk about how the ends are being gentrified and it's bad. It doesn't that's not. I shouldn't be defined as working class.
Yeah.
I can choose when to define that, but it shouldn't be my whole identity as much as someone who is middle class or someone who has the privilege to write what they want. They don't have the same identity struggle because they have the freedom. They don't get told when they get called up, hi, can you write a play about how comfy it is to be middle class, and can we set it in Waitrose, and it's really nice. Do you know what I mean? Why does it? Why do we have that? Sometimes it's important. Sometimes just let people work as an artist as much as you're letting the others work as an artist. That was a whole load of ramble. I don't know where I ended up with that. Don't know where, but we're here.
No, it's a really good point. So I think I'm guessing from hearing from both of you is that you both still feel that you are constrained by where you are from, whether that's your accent or from a council estate, and maybe how you look. And there's a lot of with working class and this discussion is a lot of intersectionality around gender and ethnicity, sexuality. So it cuts across those sorts of themes. But I wonder, how do we overcome that then? what are the routes that you can put forward a play about Diego Maradona, or you can write a film's horror script and not be judged by that? Are those routes available to you, or do you have to navigate that? Is it harder to navigate it, or do you just go off and do it and think, you know what, I'll write it because it's my creative practice, and then I'll deal with the issues about how it might get commissioned or filmed or shown? Sampira, I'll look at you first for that one.
Yeah. Not in a pessimistic way, but I don't know whether we can overcome it if your career ambition is to be, is to have the trajectory that is framed as, this is ultimate success. You'll go and do all these plays, you'll get into the big buildings, you'll win an Olivier, etc., like that trajectory, and then you'll be an artistic director. I don't know whether it's a trajectory, and they've said for years, and it's a joke on council estates. They need people on council estates, or homeless, or whoever.
So
everybody
you're dropping
else
in and out there a little bit.
Okay, I'll wait. Go. Have I come back in?
Yeah, but you're frozen a little bit. I'll go to Sam with that question.
And then, yeah, it should sort itself.
Thank you. Sorry, Sam. So same question. How do you overcome those constraints? Is there a career trajectory? While Sampira was talking, I was picking up things around compromising. Do you feel you have to compromise who you are? And I know you just said around, that the panto example you gave, you thought no more. So have you stopped that? Have you stopped trying to compromise? And do you think that might affect your career development?
I'll be brutally honest. The shift in where I want to take my career has completely changed, because the way they define success in the arts is exactly that trajectory of what Sam was just saying. You do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. I don't know whether that's to do with me accepting that the barriers are, it's incredibly unlikely. So do you accept that? I don't know. But I do agree with it's bigger than it's bigger than a chat here. This is free. Sorry, Jez. I'm only assuming here, but I'm assuming you identify with working class, or at least,
yes.
There's a greater good going on. These chats are incredible, and I know that both companies have got limits for where they no limits to where they want to go with it. But at the moment, it's free working class people talking to people who I'm assuming who are watching, majority maybe working class. That's not going to make the difference it needs to make a whole completely cultural shift in what needs to happen. And the shift needs to happen from both ends of the scale. It's not just up top that trickles down into less opportunities for working class, but it's also this grassroots community creative change. The cuts to school funding for anything to do with the arts is, non-existent. So you ain't got any kids even delving into their creativity anymore, really, unless they go to an Amdram and find it there, which is amazing. We should keep it going, but more and more the cost of living crisis is going to desecrate them. They're going to be gone because they can't afford to keep going. And you have a system that's built on hundreds and hundreds of year-old foundations that until they crumble, you ain't gonna be able to make the shift that is needed. You've got drama schools charging 15 grand a year, and only the top 2% get in. And it's not even just, when you get there, people have to pay £50 travel to get to and from London to audition for them. And you have to pay a fee to audition, 40, 50, 60 quid just to audition to get into the school. that figure alone is going to make 80% of people from working class areas go, I can't do it. So before they even get any sort of foot in the door, it's gone. So these foundations that have been built from hundreds and hundreds of years ago that are still remaining today is the only change that we're going to see. The only way that we can combat it is to slowly break them down, create a new system. And I think that system doesn't come from the current way that the industry is being run. The way it comes from is people starting a new one, and that's tough. That involves a lot of manpower. Probably involves a lot of finance. But I think the only way that it can ever change is by the people who need it changing, creating something new and challenging the form rather than trying to change the form.
Okay, I'll come back on that one again. So Sampira, sorry, you're back with us. You were saying as you were talking.
Yeah, so I think I'm on Sam's wavelength, that actually we look at the system that we've got right now a lot because it's the only one that we've got. But we also have to be quite realistic as working class people about what our function is in the arts, but also in society. Like, it's been said for years that working class people and homeless people living in homelessness are necessary for the system that we have now, because the people above us look down and go, oh, I don't want to be like them. I'll stay in my job, or I won't challenge this, or I won't challenge that. And I feel like we have a very similar function in the industry, that people will see working class people struggle, and they'll see certain stories written about us, about how horrible things are and how, you know, traumatic it is living on a council estate or living somewhere, you know, that's deprived and stuff like that. And I think it functions in a very similar way. And for me, it's very clear unequivocally what the industry and what society thinks of us. So, but the only thing that we have control over really is how we navigate the industry and whether you choose to navigate it. So you can do that, and you can navigate those spaces and try and do that trajectory, and good luck to you. Like, I really hope you get a win for the working class people. I do. But what Sam's talking about is the way that actually divesting from that way of thinking and that industry journey and that industry narrative about us was the best thing that I ever did. Divesting and going, do you know what? There's not a space for me there. That's okay. I'll make my own space and figure out work. I may not have big budgets or do this, that, and the other, but the work is what I want it to be. Everybody I work with is safe and happy. That's it. That's good enough. So divesting from, and I wish more working class people would do it, divesting from looking up and looking level and going, yeah, we don't have the big budgets that X building has or whatever, and we don't have our own award shows, and we don't have this, that, and the other. But really, whenever we step into a rehearsal room, we're going through the exact same process that a big piece at the National or whatever is going through, because that is how you make work, right? Just the content's different. We're going through the same process. It's just they've got a really big budget, we've got a smaller budget. They have all the marketing, we don't have marketing. But looking level at all of us working class artists and being like, what can we actually make here? You know, you're really good at marketing, your social media is great, you're amazing at lighting, blah blah, because there's enough of us around that are struggling in the industry because we're all looking up. But if you look level, you go, actually, I've got or know enough working class people to make a whole season of stuff for 10 years. Do you know what I mean?
Let me just push you both on that point then, because it's a really interesting analogy. But you're saying that, you know, the idea about, you know, communities coming together, working class communities coming together, sharing skills. But on the other hand, on the other side, you know, you've both mentioned the, you know, the cost of living, about the difficulties of you know, scarcity and precarity in the sector, you know, having to pay your bills. So how do we square those two things up? How do you know, build those networks that may challenge the you know, the norms of the arts funding world or the sector itself, and still live? Because it's one of the things that's really difficult. You know, I go through feast and famine. You know, I'm a fairly established practitioner with my organisation, but I have, you know, lots of times where actually, you know, there's absolutely no money coming in. You think, oh, what are you going to do? And you want to leave and go and get a full-time job because you've got bills and family space. So how do you navigate that? How do we build, or can you give any examples maybe of where we can build those networks that can sustain us both financially but also enrich us culturally? Is it possible? Sam, I'm going to look at you, because I think what I was interested to Sam Butters, I should say, I was interested in you talking about your practice, your theatre practice, about the spaces that you are creating to welcome people in from working class backgrounds and give them that space and that place and that mentorship, I think you might have mentioned. So, you know, it seems to me that you're building the future generations, maybe, or current practitioners, in terms of giving them that space to be able to you know, pursue their creative practice. So I might be wrong on that, but talk a little bit more about that. And then this idea about how do we grow, where can we grow these networks that can sustain us financially and culturally?
Listen, I don't have an answer for how you do that. I don't have one. I am trying. I don't take an income from a theatre company. Of course, I don't. It's work in progress. And look, let me tell you for a fact, I would love to make an income, and hopefully in the future that might be a case. It is about coming together. The only way that you can do that is ask. I think people are too scared to ask others for help and to make work. The priority is not about the money, and hopefully for everyone, making art is not about the money. That's the hope. The money's great because it helps us. The reason why we created art in the first place is because we've got this creative desire to give it out to the world. So you're absolutely right. I always say you've got to ask. If you want to make some work, you know enough people who are directors or trying to be directors, you know enough actors, but trust me, you know enough actors. You know someone who's wanting to do producing. It's going to take time, and it's going to take time away from making money and living. There has to be a balance somewhere. I cannot tell you, apart from working 10 times harder than someone who will have the financial safety of being able to put on risk-free work and going, if it didn't work, it's okay. That £10,000 I put on that short film, it's okay. It's okay. It's taking time. And taking time means taking effort and taking time away from making money and surviving and living and being able to pay bills. So there's no other answer apart from working yourself 50 times harder than someone who has got some level of safety. And that is not a healthy answer. No. That is not a healthy answer. We should not be working ourselves into the ground to make good work. The superpower that working class creatives have is we are naturally grafters, and we're naturally givers. We have to work harder, so it's ingrained in blood that we work harder, which is great. If you flip that on its head, we shouldn't be working harder, but if you flip it on its head, we're great workers. We're also great givers. We will give people time. We will give people that because we understand the value in selflessness. Great superpowers, but it's not a healthy answer. And I don't know other than working yourself really hard and just to get yourself on a level playing field. I wish there was something else, but I just don't have one. Sammy, please, do you have one?
No, I think that's the realistic answer. Is that, you know, if you ask if you ask any working class artist that's outside of buildings, and you go, how the hell have you got a career away from the buildings? That is what they will say. And the landscape has changed so much. It's not, it used to be, and people that are worth their salt in the industry, who from all classes, who I really admire, will go, well, when I started, it was a Labour government. Benefits work differently. So you could sign on and you could then do theatre, and you could sign on and that was fine. That wasn't a problem. And there was loads of money. Labour was just throwing money out there. So there wasn't the scarcity that there is now. And there wasn't, as open an attack on culture and art in the country through, the education systems. We're in a different time. So when we look at, when we look at people, that are the established people now, whether they're producers or directors or writers, the hardest thing that we have to come to terms with is that they came up in a different time, and it was okay and possible for them to work that way, and they hit their career at a lucky time. They were born in a lucky time, and they grew in a lucky time, and hit their career in a lucky time, where we had a different government. There was more money. Now there isn't, and we're all starting our careers, or getting some momentum in our careers, in probably one of the most uncomfortable times to be artistic, and to do that from a rhetorical standpoint, from the way that art has been and is still being censored, from the way that they're talking about degrees and high value degrees and low value degrees and all this stuff. We're in really, really hard times. So actually money's not on our side. It never has been, but particularly now it's not. And we're also not in a time now of patronage. So it used to be that artists could go, like painters or playwrights or whatever, and they could go and get a patron, and a patron would pay them to do their art. There were T's and C's to that, but you could also do that. So we're sort of out of that time now, and it's sort of like you only see patrons now for like big institutions or opera houses or whatever it is. But we've also had, who should be in on these conversations, we've also had, especially working class actors and directors that have been able to navigate in a different time, but have been able to navigate and get some sort of money that they can put away and still keep working. So I don't know where the money's going to come from, but I also know that a lot of us feel like we just have to keep going. From a working class perspective, we have to keep going because we don't have a choice. So we're not all speaking to each other as much as we should. So the time for which the industry quite likes, because the competitiveness and all this lot has us all at each other instead of at the people that are actually making our lives hard. So I think for us, listen, working class people worked through the pandemic. None of us stopped working. That there wasn't a thing of like institutions may have stopped, but we did not stop. And I think it's okay for us now, as things are ticking and doing this, that, and the other, to come together and be like, what can we like to take that time to reflect, to be like, actually sidestep the industry and industry leaders and whatever they're doing, because they never really notice us anyway. What do we actually want, and how can we do that? Because there's going to be generations of working class artists coming up in the next 5 years, let's say, when things are probably going to get worse. And what is it now that we can offer them, or at least support them through? Because right now we can't, because we're very divided, because all of us are just trying to survive, which is how the system works, that we all can't find time to talk to each other, because I think that's the first step. I don't know what the final thing is. I have no clue. Nobody does, because we're just under this system that's not built for us. It's hard to imagine the final step of that, of a new system, because the system's never really been built for us. So it's hard to imagine, but it's also all we've had. So it's hard to imagine something else. But I think the first step that we can take is working class artists speaking to each other more, actually, and, you know, trading services and doing that, because, yeah, not a lot of us have money, but, you know, like Sam was saying, like time and stuff like that, like there's so many working class artists that come to me and go, you know, I really want to play with this, and I go, well, I can't give you any money, but, you know, I can write your Arts Council application for you, or, you know, I can do this, that and the other. And then I'm like, oh, I'm doing this horror exhibition and I really need a video editor. The artist that I help them do their Arts Council goes, yeah, you help me with my Arts Council, I'll edit that for you at mates rates, or, you know, whatever, if you do this for me. Like, there's different ways that, like Sam was saying, there's different ways that extract value. Obviously we're in a money-based system, money is, you know, whatever, but it's never really been built for us, and I think we just need to roll with that as best we can.
There's a lot to unpick in that from the pair of you. You know, it's interesting you're saying about the good times and the Labour Party. I mean, it's actually the Thatcher government that first kick-started, you know, the benefits idea with the enterprise allowance that allow artists and musicians, you know, to hone they didn't know it wasn't meant to be like that. It was in a way meant to control them, but it actually kick-started a whole generation, and then, you know, Labour picked it up. But look, as you've both alluded to now, you look at society now and the myriad issues that we're facing, and I do worry about, you know, again, I would suggest, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are, you know, developed, experienced practitioners. I do worry about where working class creatives are coming from, whether they're, whether they're actors or writers. There are good networks around. You know, I was reading earlier about the Working Class Writers Network, you know, that encouraging, I think, Sam, how you mentioned your theatre practice. So there are these examples, and what you just said, Sampira, about that informal network where you'll help each other out. But if you have less people coming through, you know, those networks are going to be reduced. So there'll be less of us and trying to help each other out, you know, and with the best will in the world, when you're trying to do your own career, it's, you know, time, you know, we haven't talked about time as a, you know, as a finance really. Money is always needed, but, you know, the pressures we have on our capacity and our time as a resource is also getting reduced. So, yeah, I think it was a very big question to throw you about how it is. But from what I'm getting, the sense is, you know, that we need either spaces or places or networks that encourage that discussion, that reduces that competitive nature. Because, again, I think you're right, Sampira, you know, with the best will in the world, we are in competition, or it feels like we're in competition for those decreasing amounts of money. And we tend to, you know, this is a generalization, but we try and hold those things back and not share that knowledge and that expertise, because, you know, well, if I give it to you, you might get that project. And rather than thinking, actually, we want you to get that project and build you up, we might be the ones that suffer from that. So there's that competitive nature, and about how we try and change that. And I think, Sam, you mentioned earlier about you assuming that, you know, working class people are listening to the conversation today. I think actually a lot of policymakers, you know, might not be on the stream, but will be listening back to these discussions across the week, because that's the idea of the Radical Listening Week, that we try and, you know, bring people together in a very controlled, small manner. But actually, the impact of this discussion goes further, and it's about, you know, those whether it's policy, whether it's funders, whether it's commissioners, that they actually listen to some of the challenge that you've brought up today, and think about, okay, how do we rethink perhaps some of the things that we do, or how do we engage with the two Sams on this call to talk us through about how we might do things better. So there was a real big question, but you brought some really fascinating issues there. And this sense that, Sam, and I'm, as I said, I'm a bit older, and I'm like you. When I was younger, I wanted to change the world. I thought I could change the world. Now, with slowing down a bit, I try and see how can I change my next door neighbour or my friend down the road, and make those small incremental changes that hopefully will ripple out. And you build that, for me, you build those networks through those small tiny interventions. So I'm just getting a message. Okay, sorry, I will do that, Charlene. We've only got about 5 minutes left, and we haven't covered anywhere near the sort of things that I'd written down or we spoke about before. I wanted to very briefly bring it back to Birmingham and be a bit specific about that. We cannot escape the fact that Birmingham City Council is in a precarious financial situation, which I think inevitably have some effect on the culture and creative sector over the coming years. We also have the youngest population in Europe, as we are told many times, but we also have 42% of our children living in poverty still, which is a sort of obscene statistic. We've briefly talked about the reduction of arts education in schools. I think Sampira, I think you also mentioned how that is now playing out in the HE sector. The idea that it's going to study drama or film is somehow a Mickey Mouse type degree, and if you're going to spend all that money, you want to be coming out with a whatever a career degree is. So again, I'm throwing a lot at you here, but what do you think that this impact of all these things might have in young people entering in or finding a way in or thinking about a career in the creative sector in Birmingham over the next couple of years? Sam, I'm going to have to come to you first. I think Sampira's gone. Oh, she's back. That's a massive question, but just some closing thoughts about.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of, in terms of what it's going to do, the repercussions, I think they're pretty self-explanatory. There is not going to be the same level. There's not going to be the same level of work. The opposite to that is that Birmingham's in a very unique position at the moment, I think, over the last 3 years, that the creative culture and the creative kickstart it's had, whether that was from the Commonwealth Games, whatever that was from, there is now a sudden Birmingham pride about being from Birmingham, and the creative space is being developed. So the question is with Birmingham is, if you're having if you're having film studios being put up here, if you're having a massive shift in creative, a massive creative shift in creating more opportunities, more work, and more creative spaces for people, but your funding's not there to develop and inspire Birmingham people, what's it for? Is it for the people now moving outside of London so that they can now come to Birmingham and it's cheaper for them to work down here? Because you ain't going to have people from Birmingham being able to work, or what you should have anyway in Birmingham. It should be Birmingham stories. It should be a Birmingham authentic route. If you're going to develop the city, you want to develop the city with the people who live in the city. I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's a wonderful opportunity at the moment for Birmingham creatives with how it's being developed. But with all the cuts of funding, with everything that's coming through from the Birmingham people, you are not going to have Birmingham people in those Birmingham spaces.
Okay, thank you. That's a really nice closing summation. Sampira, any thoughts on that, or your thoughts on that?
On the Birmingham City Council?
Well, just in the position that we find ourselves in, we have the youngest city in Europe, but we have a huge amount of child poverty. Education, arts provision, education is being cut. There's less people studying drama or arts within the higher education. So again, a lot to throw. But what do you see the future? Are you optimistic, as Sam has said, that the opportunities will be there despite the issues that we face?
Yeah, I think. Yes, but I think because I think parallel to that, there's a conversation brewing that I hope gains momentum about how we speak about art. So art is always framed in this government and in British society as a luxury. So if you go and do art, it's a luxurious thing to do, right? It's like a misnomer thing to do with your life. But actually art is a human right, really, because it engages everyone. It improves everyone's lives. People have had huge improvements to their mental health, to their perspectives on the world, to social gathering, to being able to process information and process huge issues to do with the world through art, like all of these different things, right?
Sampira, I'm going to I'm very sorry. We are
no, you're fine. Go on.
To run out of time. Charlene, I know you wanted to have a quick goodbye. I'm going to leave it with Art is a Human Right by Sampira, and we'll ask Charlene to come back in and finish off. Sorry, Sampira.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank the panel for their amazing insights into navigating the sector as a working class creative worker. And I also just wanted to thank Culture Central and More Than a Moment and Arts Council England and Birmingham 2022 Festival for supporting Radical Listening Week this week. Please stay tuned for tomorrow. Please continue to engage in the conversation, and hopefully we'll get some more insights for you later on this week. Thank you again. Bye-bye.